Okay, so this is the shed. 101 things going on in here. But this is the thing I wanted to show you and make a little video about and just talk about this knife. So this is a vintage Mora knife, okay? I guess dating from 1960s, 1970s, I'm not too sure to be honest. But I think it's a very, very interesting knife. I think in many ways it's a little bit superior to some of the stuff that Mora are doing today. They do make knives very, very similar to this, like the Mora #1 Classic and the Sloyd. Obviously most of their knives they do now have plastic handles, alright. I don't have a lot of Mora knives at the moment. I've only got the, this is the filleting knife. But most of you guys will be familiar with Mora knives who are into bushcraft. Usually a plastic handle like that, and you know, usually a little bit more of a blade. This is a filleting knife, like I said. I do prefer wooden handles, but compared to the other wooden handled Moras, I think this one is superior. Alright, I like the sheath and I like the blade. I'll take you for it, right? Okay, so it's a bit thicker, okay, than your regular Mora, okay. I'm not quite sure exactly, is that just because it was a large blade knife, or whether all Moras of this era, they made the blade a little bit thicker, okay. This is quite a big knife, okay, we're talking just over 6 inches. Just a little bit of a size comparison. There's a 3-inch blade, okay, and then we have a 4-inch blade, so it's a pretty big knife. It's a little bit too big for me personally, but I think the quality and how it's constructed and everything like that is really good. So it's a little bit of a thicker blade, okay, and also with the tang. Now obviously it's a rat tail tang, okay. The tang goes all the way to the end, and it's done the traditional way, where it makes a rivet, you know, by pounding the end of the tang of the knife, okay. So you know, tang goes all the way through, and then a rivet's made by the end of the tang in a washer, alright, which is quite a traditional way of doing it. How they do it now, it's a little bit different, okay. What they seem to do now is they do sort of a partial stick tang, so the blade will be a little bit like that, and then they seem to put some kind of clip in the bottom. If you look at the more modern ones, like the Mora #1 they make now, you look at this hole here, it's just a little clip, so I'm not entirely convinced. Obviously this has stood the test of time. You got to think 30-40 years old, and you know, still in pretty good shape, the handle's still attached and everything like that. So you know, I think the construction, the way they constructed it then was better. And also the other great thing about this, the back of the knife here, now it's thicker like I said, but also anybody who uses modern Moras know that there's usually a little bit of roll to the spine of the blade, okay. And the problem with that is when you're using a ferro rod, okay, you don't get a spark, or you get very little spark. With this one you get a really good spark, so it's a little bit of a better design. The handle painted red. The reason the handle was usually painted red, because these were primarily user knives, okay. They were just designed to be functional in the field, and obviously being made in Sweden, if they were dropped in the snow, very, very easy to find your knife. If you had this knife and you dropped it, you know, it's a camouflage. So then that was just a practical step to make it easy to find your knife, so you don't leave your knife behind. And that's very much the kind of like Swedish knife tradition. As I understand it, what they care about in Sweden, when somebody in Sweden goes to buy a knife, their kind of knife culture, if you will, is they care about the blade. They want a quality blade. Alright, they don't, not too fussed about the handle, they're not too fussed about the sheath, they don't want it too fancy, not too many bells and whistles. They just want a good quality blade. Alright, so that's kind of like what Mora are about. That's what their sort of ethos is, if you will. I mean, if you go to Norway, Norwegians like a little bit more of a fancy knife. This is a Norwegian knife, this is a Heli Harding. So it's like a little bit more complex, a nice burr, and you'll have nice knives with antler and all that kind of stuff, and you know, a bit more of a fancy sheath. So the knife culture in Norway is a little bit different. They seem to have appreciate a little bit more craftsmanship as where the Swedish knife seems to be a little bit more kind of utilitarian. Okay, if we look at the sheath, now the sheath is really interesting. Okay, so it looks like leather. Okay, it's really hard, and I was really puzzled by the sheath. I have to say, I just wasn't sure what material it was. Now the belt clip here is just a little bit of leather, but the actual sheath is a type of paper. It's a type of vulcanized paper. Alright, so it's some kind of special process, and they make the paper and they harden it and they make a usable sheath out of it. But all I can say, I mean, it worked, right? Sheath's in pretty good shape for the age. Alright, and you got to remember, at the time this was made, this was a budget knife. Okay, this was, you know, this was a $20, $30 knife. You know, this wasn't, you know, a high-end piece of gear. This was just, you know, somebody to take out into the woods, you know, a hunter or, you know, woodsman, and sort of bash around and get used. So I mean, it's held up pretty well. Do you know what I mean? A bit of the stitching's going here, but you know, much nicer than what they do today. All right. So here's the modern equivalent. All right, which is just plastic, which nobody really likes. I think this one's off the Sloyd. So if you were to buy this knife today, you would get this. I think how they did it in the past was much nicer. It's a much nicer sheath. Obviously these knives were made with cheapness in mind. You know, they were budget knives, you know what I mean? So, you know, if they'd done a full leather sheath where they put the knife cost up, this was just a practical solution. I don't think they do this anymore. First time I've seen one of these, very unusual. So what can I say? A great knife. Really nice knife. I think in a couple of ways it's better than what Mora are doing today, you know what I mean? What I want to do is I've just bought one off eBay. Now, as I said, this is a little bit too long a blade for me personally, right? I think it's a great knife, but just personally, the blade's length is a little bit too much. You know, I prefer something like, where's the Harding? You know, 3 inches. So I've got another one off eBay. It's a bit of a shorter blade, and I'm going to do like a little bit of reconditioning and just bring it back to life. But what a great knife, you know what I mean? If I was working at Mora, if I was one of the guys at Mora, I'd be saying, look, you know, guys, we're not doing something like this. I think it would appeal to some people, you know. A great knife.